Hello and welcome. It is Big Talk with Todd and Noah presented by Xfinity. Another week in the books and more calories and carbs consumed in Madison. Mickey's Dairy Bar delivers yet again.
Right. Can't go wrong there. I mean, if you're going the breakfast route, can't go wrong. If you're going the lunch route, extra strong. And then if you top it off with a milkshake, whether it's breakfast or lunch, you will not be disappointed.
Actually, before we get into the football stuff, can you describe to me the difference between a milkshake and a malt? Because you seemed very excited about this and then frustrated when it wasn't quite the same.
Well, what I was asking for and obviously did not get was I wanted a chocolate banana milkshake, but with malt flavor added to it. So chocolate malt. But I had no malt flavor. I had chocolate flavor. I had banana, but I did not have the malt. So I was trying to explain it, like if you ever had a melted milk ball, or malted milk ball, that's the flavor I was going for with my milkshake.
I think I know what you're talking about. I really do. But I can pretty much guarantee that the waitress, when she looked in your eyes, was more confused than an eighth grader taking the SATs.
Yeah, she was definitely confused. She tried to sort it out right there at the table, but it didn't work. So, but you know what? The chocolate banana shake was awesome anyway. So it was great.
Yeah, no, you can't go wrong. Same with Oregon. Right now, they can't go wrong. They cruise to a victory as #1 in the country. The rest of the top of the Big Ten, while they got some wins, did struggle a little bit. But let's start with that #1 team in the land right now. They beat number 20 Illinois 38-9, but this one was pretty much over at halftime, 35-3 after the first two quarters. And Dillon Gabriel's looking every bit like a Heisman hopeful that we expected he would.
Yeah, I mean, he just is rolling along as their whole team is, really, they are playing their best football. They've really hit their stride now on both sides of the ball. They got their offensive line issues sorted out several weeks ago. Their defense is playing at a high level. And Dillon Gabriel, I'm just amazed. And I give a lot of credit to Will Stein, the offensive coordinator there. I mean, he did a great job with Bo Nix the 2 years prior to this. And of course, we look at what Bo Nix is doing now with the Broncos in the NFL. And then what he's doing with Dillon Gabriel in 1 year. I mean, he's leading the country, completing 77% of his passes, threw for, 291 and 3 touchdowns and ran for 1 this past week. So I think he's playing at an extremely high level. He's been a great leader for their football team, and they're rolling along right now.
Defense is playing well. They forced a couple of interceptions for Luke Altmaier, who had been clean for most of the year. And Illinois, I mean, this just shows how impressive Oregon has been. They don't even drop out of the top 25 with this loss. They go down at 24 this week. So a tip of the cap probably to the Ducks more than anything. The real, I guess, curiosity of this week in the Big Ten was what would Ohio State look like? They had the bye week following the crushing loss in Eugene. They now host Nebraska in Columbus this week. And #4 in the country, again, similar that the hat tip to kind of how that game was played. They stay in the top 4. But they struggled to get past Nebraska. And this one feels like it was more credit to Nebraska, but Ohio State definitely has some things to sort out. They do get the win 21-17, and that's the most important factor here.
Yeah, I mean, there was question how Ohio State would be, and there was just as much question of what Nebraska was going to look like coming on the heels of getting blown out in Bloomington the week before. And that was an embarrassing loss for Matt Rule and everybody associated with Nebraska football. So how were they going to play going into Columbus the following week? And I thought they played really well. I mean, they did a lot of good things. They had a couple unfortunate breaks, couple mistakes that hurt them, but they gave Ohio State everything that they could handle. And the problem for Ohio State right now, as they get ready for a big game coming up, is they got issues with their offensive line. They lost their starting left tackle in the Oregon game that we covered. And the guy that they brought in has struggled. And then I think he got banged up in this game as well. So they've got issues in the offensive line. They only ran the football for 64 yards against Nebraska. And so, Will Howard threw the ball well, had a couple of touchdowns, but, they were a 28-point favorite in this game. Ran for 64 yards. They were 1 for 10 on third down. So, they got some squeak to their wheels right now as they're getting ready to head to Happy Valley.
Yeah, big game against Penn State. Speaking of, we were in Madison to watch the number 3 team in the country, Nittany Lions, 28-13 win at Camp Randall. And this one almost felt similar in some ways to the Illinois game where they couldn't quite pull away, couldn't pull away until the end. But the big story in this game, obviously, Drew Aller going down before the end of the first half, does not play in the second half, and Bo Pribula looked pretty good at quarterback for Penn State.
Yeah, I thought he looked really good, and I think the things that stood out to me about Penn State in this game, in this win, number one was the depth of talent they had, because not only did we see a backup quarterback, we saw one of their best defensive ends out of the game. We saw an injury to their right tackle, bringing him out of the game. So they had to play other guys in a close football game. And, they just played their best in the fourth quarter, which, I think they kind of wore down Wisconsin by the time it was all said and done. They had 2 long touchdown drives in the fourth quarter, directed by Bo Pribula, who played the whole second half. And he was good. I mean, he was 11 for 13, 98 yards and a touchdown. He ran the ball for 28 yards. I thought his running ability, kind of created some problems for Wisconsin that they weren't necessarily prepared for in that game. But again, they did what they had to do. Their defense was stifling in the second half, which they've been all year. They eliminated the run game for Wisconsin, which they were really leaning on for the last 3 weeks during their win streak. Penn State ran for 173 yards. They were 8 for 14 on third down. So they were efficient. They had the one fumble down the goal line and a real kind of a goofy looking snap on fourth down. But beyond that, Penn State looked to me like a really, really solid football team. And I think the thing they showed me too, not only their depth, they got grit. This team's got some grit that I think is maybe a little bit different or deeper than I've seen before.
Grit, I would say, is the way you could describe Indiana's victory as well this weekend against Washington at home, 31-17. The defense set the tone. No Curtis Rourke, but Taven Jackson came in, and while he didn't light the world on fire, he played a pretty clean football overall. 8-0 now for the Hoosiers in year one under Curt Cignetti.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of those games where offensively they didn't look like they've looked all year in the first 7 wins. They've been averaging almost 500 yards a game, only 300 and some yards of offense. They actually got outgained by Washington in this game. But
I mean, that's normal for Washington, Todd.
True, that's true. But Justice Ellison, big game, 123 yards and a touchdown on 29 carries. They had a 67-yard interception return by D'Angelo Pons. He also had another interception later in the game. So the defense came up with some plays. They had a 65-yard punt return by Miles Price. So all 3 phases of the game coming through for Indiana without their starting quarterback, Curtis Rourke. So very efficient. They had 1 penalty for 5 yards in the game. And Curt Cignetti's team is 8-0 and looking every bit the part of a championship contender.
Yeah, and there's still optimism that Curtis Rourke will return this week against Michigan State. We can get into that a little bit later. Just looking at the rest of the Big Ten, there was the one game we talked about, the Friday night game. And when I say night game, I mean night game. It was 11 p.m. Eastern time, 8 p.m. local out on the West Coast between USC and Rutgers. It was a really tough spot for Rutgers to be in, but USC gets a much-needed victory to get back in the win column, get back to 500 on the year.
Yeah, USC is funny to me because from a talent standpoint, they're really good. I mean, Miller Moss is playing extremely well. Woody Marks is an excellent tailback. They've got quality wide receivers. They're playing better on defense. Going into last week, they were number 1 in the Big Ten in third down defense. Penn State was number 2, but USC was number 1 going into the games this past weekend. So, they just have not been able to finish games. And this is a game where, look, Rutgers tried to make it close, right? I think it was 28-20 at one point. And I'm sure there were some people on that USC side that were saying, oh, no, here we go again. But they were able to extend it, get some turnovers from their defense, get some sacks, and find a way to win one in the second half. And that's been their problem. But I think from a talent standpoint, they would be a scary team for anybody to play.
Yeah, no question. Rutgers continues on the tailspin right now, 4 straight losses now for the Scarlet Knights. We were curious to see what Michigan and Michigan State would look like. Davis Warren gets the start. The one thing to keep in mind, Jack Tuttle is now retiring from football.
Right.
Just a note to keep in mind after 7 years of college football, after another concussion, just trying to prioritize his health, and we wish him well in the next stage of his life. But his Michigan Wolverines did get the win. Davis Warren had 123 yards and a touchdown, and they win 24-17. But Donovan Edwards throws another touchdown in this one, and that ends up being the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I'm happy for Davis Warren, as a former quarterback, just like we heard Bo Prabula talk about, when KT interviewed him after the game, talk about, my attitude is just always prepare to be a starter. Always prepare like you're going to be a starter, because you never know when your number is going to get called. And he was ready. And I think Davis Warren was ready. He was the starter for the first 3 games, went to the bench, hasn't seen any playing time since then. And then all of a sudden now he's back as the starter, and probably the most efficient quarterback game that Michigan has had this year. Not big numbers, still haven't thrown for over 200 yards, but it was efficient. Right. He took care of the football, was efficient. They also played Alex Orji, but he was strictly in there as a running quarterback. He ran for over 60 yards and a touchdown. So they got some productivity from both those guys. And they won a tough game at home against their rival. They were on a 2-game losing streak. So it was a good win for Michigan at home against an arch rival.
Real quick, Iowa and Minnesota both put up 40 spots and both pick up their 5th wins of the season.
Yeah, impressive, really. For Iowa, Caleb Johnson over 100 yards again. They had a 28-point explosion in the third quarter that featured a punt return for a touchdown by Weegan. But also, their defense and special teams do what they do. That's part of their winning formula, complementary football, and it was on display in that one. And then Minnesota, kind of sneaky and quietly, is at 5-3 and playing some pretty good football. That was an impressive win. They jumped out to a 24-0 lead over Maryland, and then just kind of cruised to a 48-23 win. Max Brosmer, career high 4 touchdown passes, 26-33, over 300 yards passing. So the Gophers are kind of sitting there in a pretty good position at 5-3.
Yep, roll the boat, getting it done. As we look at some game previews for Week 10, let's start with the big one. That's noon on Fox. This is big noon kickoff on Fox. You've got College Game Day that's going to be there. It is going to be a large affair in Happy Valley. Number 4, Ohio State. Number 3, Penn State. The storyline surrounding Penn State is trying to win these big games. This was the game that was circled on the calendar before the year. You could talk about Michigan and whatnot, but this is a specific year with Ohio State that Penn State needs to find a way. And James Franklin is 4-16 against Ohio State and Michigan. He's 1-9 against Ohio State, the only win coming in 2016, the year they won the Big Ten. The question becomes, at least surrounding Penn State, who's starting at quarterback? Is it going to be Drew Aller? Will he be ready? Is it going to be Bo Prabula? My assumption is we won't know until literally right before kickoff, and neither will Ohio State. So the Buckeyes will have to prepare for both.
Well, and I think you almost have to prepare for both of them anyway, because they've done so much already this season with both quarterbacks. So, if you're Jim Knowles and that defensive staff for Ohio State, you have to prepare for both of them. This is a big game for James Franklin, obviously. It's a big game for Drew Aller, because as good as he was last year with his numbers and touchdowns and interceptions and all of that, and take care of the football, he did not play well against Michigan or Ohio State. He struggled. The offense struggled. Well, the offenses looked way different this year. They've been more explosive. They've been pushing the ball down the field. I still don't think it's a great wide receiving core, but they're better. And as a collective group, they've been pretty solid. The tight end is special. The backs are special.
Yeah.
So I know Drew Aller wants to play in this game, but the question is going to be, is an 80% Drew Aller going to give you a better chance against Ohio State's defense than 100% Bo Prabula?
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing they're going to have to decide. Not saying he's going to be 80. He might be 100% by the time Saturday comes along. But he was nowhere near looking at 100% when we saw him trying to warm up to start the third quarter on Saturday night. So, and I'll say this, if Bo Prabula is the guy, Penn State fans should not, throw their hands up and say we have no chance, because the kid proved he can play. Yep. He's not just a runner. He's not like Alex Orji in the sense that he is a pretty quality passer as well, and has proven that. but he gives them a dual threat dynamic that may actually cause more problems and more stress for the Ohio State defense than any other thing. So we'll see how it plays out. I would expect both of them will play regardless, and whether or not Drew Allar is good enough to play or start, we'll find out on the day of the game. But I will say this: I think Penn State is a better team right now. Now, and it's not because they're ranked higher. I think they're better in the trenches right now than Ohio State is. And so I think of all the years that they've struggled to beat them, I think this may be their best opportunity, particularly with the injuries on the Ohio State offensive line.
Right.
I think Penn State's better in the offensive line. I think they're more active and disruptive on the defensive line right now than Ohio State is.
You mentioned it's a big game for James Franklin, obviously. It's also a huge game for Will Howard personally. His dad went to Penn State. His sister currently is a student at Penn State.
Yeah.
And on top of that, he said this week that he felt slighted that they didn't recruit him. He's from that area, and he wanted to go there, and they didn't want him. So you know that this is that extra motivation. That can be both good and bad for any player, but especially a quarterback when you're trying to press a little too much to prove, hey, you should have taken me.
Yeah, I mean, he's an older guy. He's a mature guy. So I think he'll handle that part of it fine. I think he's a great competitor, and he'll go in there. And he's played well all along. Even in their loss to Oregon, he still played well in that game. You know, he made a lot of big plays. So I would expect him to play well again in this one. You know, those wide receivers are still the real deal that they have at Ohio State, and that will be a real challenge for the secondary at Penn State. But yeah, I think he'll manage and handle the emotion of that. And once the kickoff happens and you're playing, that's what your focus becomes. I mean, all that other stuff and those other thoughts before the game, the days leading up to the game, maybe you think about that. But once the ball's kicked off, man, you're locked in.
Yep. Second game that's a marquee this week in the Big Ten. Number 1 Oregon goes to Ann Arbor, 3:30 on CBS. Takes on the defending champions, Michigan. Before the season, we were talking about Michigan, and I said their floor was 9 wins. So hand up, I would say that I was probably incorrect there, because they'd have to run the table. They'd have to beat the number 1 team in the country, Indiana and Ohio State, the rest of the way, which I just don't see as realistic. But do they have any opportunity here to stun the rest of the country and take down number 1?
Well, I mean, they have a chance. It's going to be difficult. I mean, because Oregon, again, is playing at their best right now, and they're clicking on both sides of the ball. So you say, okay, well, what would have to happen for Michigan to have a chance, a great chance to win? Number 1, Oregon would have to beat Oregon. Okay, Oregon would have to be careless with the football, turn the ball over, have some problems with turnovers. Or the other thing is, if Oregon was just not able to stop Michigan from running the football.
Right.
And again, I think Oregon is playing really good defense, run defense as well. But if either one of those things happen, or a combination of both of those things, then Michigan will have a chance to be in this ball game.
3:30 on Peacock exclusive. Undefeated Indiana, number 13 in the country, goes to Michigan State. And you might look at this one and say, hey, this is an Indiana victory waiting to happen. But we were just at Michigan State a couple weeks ago. We know what they're capable of. We know what Peyton Childs is capable of. We've seen that defense when they're playing at their best. It'll depend on whether or not Curtis Rourke is available, on swaying kind of what people think about this matchup. But Indiana looking to stay unbeaten against a challenge in front of them.
Yeah. I mean, this is not a layup. This is not a gimme. And I think Indiana and Curt Cignetti will recognize that. There's some talent on that Michigan State roster. And Peyton Childs, again, same thing we talked about when we were there. He's got to take care of the football. He's talented. He can make big-time plays as a thrower and a runner, but he can't be careless with the football. And Indiana will definitely capitalize if he makes mistakes. And that's one of the things. They've been efficient on offense. They've been opportunistic on defense. And so if Peyton Childs is careless with the football, Indiana will make that count, and they'll make it pay. So it's still going to be an uphill climb for Michigan State, but a lot depends on Curtis Rourke or Taven Jackson or some combination of both, and we'll see how that one plays out. But I think Indiana just continues to be one of, if not the best story in college football right now, not just the Big Ten, but all the way across the country, and the job that Curt Cignetti and his staff have done.
Yeah, you look at them, Army still undefeated.
Right.
They're in that type of realm right now, and Kurt Cignetti deserves all the credit in the world. He is the obvious front runner for Coach of the Year in the country as well. Final game for us this week is going to be where we're at, and that's going to be Wisconsin at Iowa, 7:30 p.m. on NBC. Wisconsin, that lost last week against Penn State, snapped a 3-game winning streak. So you've got 2, 5, and 3 teams going up against each other. But it's interesting where you've got storylines. Brendan Sullivan came in last week for Iowa and certainly changed the trajectory of their game. They go for 40 points again. And it seems like the offense found a little bit of a rhythm. For Wisconsin, all that rhythm that they had established was halted against one of the best defenses in the country.
Yeah, I mean, these are two teams that are going to want to be very similar, right? They're going to want to run the football, play defense, play complementary football. That's when both of these teams are at their best. I mean, Iowa, their formula hasn't changed for a lot of years. But you're right. I think Sullivan gave them a little spark in the same way or in a similar way to what Bo Pribula brought to Penn State against this Wisconsin team. Now they're going to face another guy in Brendan Sullivan who is a run threat as well. The difference for the Wisconsin defense is they had to make adjustments on the fly in the second half with Bo Pribula. They will know going in and have a full week of preparation for Brendan Sullivan this week and be a little bit probably more buttoned up on the run game threat of the quarterback that they would face with Iowa. But they still have to stop Caleb Johnson. They still have to deal with this very good Iowa offensive line and a defense that is typical Iowa defense. So, they're averaging 29.4 points per game this year, Iowa, which probably feels like 50 a game.
That's astronomical.
Fans, right? Yeah. So, I mean, they're doing it, they're doing it in a lot of different ways. And I was impressed with Wisconsin last week. I thought defensively they played really well.
Definitely.
I thought they played well enough to win and got worn down and kind of got tired in the fourth quarter and gave up some long scoring drives. Not to take anything away from Penn State. It was an excellent win on the road for Penn State with their backup quarterback. But the pick six really turned the game around that Braden Locke threw. And, he, again, similar kind of situation. He can't make that kind of mistake against an Iowa team that will capitalize. And, Iowa is going to play field position. Wisconsin is a team that likes to play field position. And that aspect of the game will be huge, I think, in our matchup. Who has the upper hand in field position through the kicking game and average starting field position? And a game like this will be very big.
No question. Home stretch here for us. A couple games that have bowl eligibility impacts week 10. Minnesota goes to number 24, Illinois. Illinois already with 6 wins on the season. But you mentioned Gophers are playing some good ball.
They are. I mean, it'll be tough to beat them in Champaign. I mean, Illinois will be coming off of a disappointing loss and want to get back on the right track. But I think Minnesota's got an excellent shot in this. I think they're playing well. I think Brosmer has really settled in at quarterback, and they're playing pretty salty on defense. So that should be a good one.
Nebraska tried to become bowl eligible for the first time in what feels like forever at this point. And they've been right on that number a couple of times. Last year, they had a couple chances at the end of the season to get to 6 wins, couldn't do it for the final 2 games. They're 5-3 right now. They are hosting UCLA this week. It feels like the big opportunity to get to that 6th victory.
Yeah, I've been saying it for 2 years that they're going to get to a bowl game, and I think they'll find their way there with a win this week. Even though UCLA is playing better as of late, I think that they are, they've kind of turned a corner and doing some things offensively. Ethan Garbers has played well the last couple of weeks, but I do think this is the game for Nebraska to win, and I think they should be very confident based on how they played in Columbus. I know none of them believe in moral victories, and I'm not saying that that's what that was, but they played a very good Ohio State team nose to nose, and so there's a lot of positives to take from that. They put the Indiana game in the rearview mirror, and now they get to come home and try to win their 6th game of the season and become bowl eligible.
Former Pac-12 matchup now on the Big Ten, 2 4-4 teams between USC and Washington. This is big because it could be the difference between bowling or at home come postseason time.
Yeah, and this one's kind of a toss-up. Again, I've talked about the talent of USC. I think they're the more talented team, but they're going on the road, and we were in Seattle. If it, that can be a loud environment, a good home field advantage for the Huskies. Will Rogers is still capable of lighting it up if they don't get after him, if they don't pressure him. So this one could go either way, but I do think that SC is the more talented of the two teams.
Let's move on to our Xfinity Big Connections. It is a trophy game this weekend in Iowa City. We will be there for it. I'm sure we'll stop by the Iowa Athletic Club as well, and we'll fill everybody in on how much I dominate NBA Jam against our entire crew. But the Iowa-Wisconsin rivalry first played in 1894. Both schools have been in the Big Ten since 1900. Wisconsin leads the all-time series 49, 46, and 2. So a very closely played matchup. And the trophy is fairly new. The Heartland Bull Trophy, a brass bull. Look at this thing. You got to take the bull by the horns, White Goodman style. Get there, make it happen. But it's only been introduced in 2004. So we're talking about 20 years old. Iowa won the inaugural trophy 30-7 in 2004. Wisconsin leads the series 10-8 since the trophy was introduced. Last year, it was Iowa 15-6. That is the most Iowa type of score you could possibly get. That was Braden Lonk's first appearance, where Tanner Mordecai went down with a hand injury. But this is an awesome trophy, Todd. I'm all in on this one.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, they've got, the Big Ten's got some outstanding trophy games and outstanding trophies. But yeah, this one's all right.
Yeah, I would be a little extra motivated for this. That's just me. And I'm going to be honest. I mean, we were at Kinnick last year for a night game. Obviously, we just were at Camp Randall last week. Both of those are incredible atmospheres, especially at night. And so I'm excited to get back to Kinnick. You've got the Children's Hospital. You've got now the trophy up for grabs. I think that it should be an awesome atmosphere.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, this one will feel like an old-fashioned Big Ten West Division game. That's what it's going to feel like. Two teams are going to try to play with a similar formula to win. Complementary football, field position, and capitalize on opportunities if you do get in the red zone.
No question. You can actually, before we get to our final Knights Guard update, because I was going to ask about trophy stuff anyway, let's get to our Xfinity third chair real quick. Time for some fan-submitted questions presented by Xfinity. So the first one, can a 2-loss Ohio State team still make the playoff, Todd?
Well, it's possible. I think it probably depends on when that second loss would happen. Yep. I think if that loss happens this week, it's going to be tough. If the loss happens, if they get themselves to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game and they lose there, then that would be maybe different. But I think if they lose this week, and that would be 2 losses in their last 3-4 games, whatever it would be, might be tough. But who knows? I mean, this 12 team, nobody really knows how it's going to all play out because there's still major games left. Yeah. And but I think they would be depending on too many other factors, I think, at that point to get in.
They would not control their own destiny, and that is not a great place to be in. So the best thing they can do is keep winning and hoping for the best. Second one is Dillon Gabriel, the Heisman front runner, Todd.
He's in the conversation. I would not say he's the front runner. And I'm not really at the point yet where I start talking a lot about Heisman. That comes in November, which is just a few days away. But I would say I'll go ahead and jump ahead a few days. But I would say right now the front runners are Ashton Genty at Boise State, Cam Ward at Miami. Yep. And I think Travis Hunter is still in that conversation because he very well may be the best player in college football. He missed a few games with injury, but when he's back and healthy, he's as dynamic as anybody that you could ever turn on a TV and watch. But I do think the way Dillon Gabriel is playing, he's in that conversation. But I think people expected him to play well, right? He played well at Oklahoma. He played well at UCF. He's on the great teams, on the number 1 team in the country, and he's played well. But I think those other guys are maybe a little bit ahead of him right now.
We were talking about this. I know he didn't have a huge game, but could Tyler Warren get invited to New York? Not necessarily win the award. Could he get invited as one of those top 5?
Yeah, I think if he has another, look, he's probably not going to have another 17-catch, 224-yard game like he had against SC. But if he does have big games in some of their big moments, like next week or this coming week when they play Ohio State, if Tyler Warren has a big show-out kind of game, then yeah, I think the guy could possibly earn an invite to New York.
It would be pretty cool to see a tight end / quarterback / running back / offensive lineman / everything get his way over there. You can submit those questions, as mentioned, to the show every week using hashtag Big Talk. All right, final Knights Guard update of the year. Heard the season is over, but a strong finish, though.
Yeah, strong finish. Nice, convincing win in our last game against Covenant Day, and had a nice little team party that night at one of our players' houses, and it was fun. It was a good way to wrap it up. The kids got better each week. Just kind of wish we would have been able to play that Holy Trinity 8th grade team later in the season instead of that opener.
Yeah.
But after that opening loss, we played very well and had, I think, 7 games in a row that we won and scored a lot of points, and the kids had a lot of fun. So I think one of the coolest things, probably the greatest testaments to our coaching staff and to to how we approached it with these kids. We had 38 guys on the team, and we had not one kid quit from the time we started in like May or June until all the way through the end of the season. So a real tribute to our kids too, and the character of the kids that we had on the team.
Yeah, no doubt. And elite special teamers as well on Charlotte Christian.
Yeah,
that's what I hear. All 3 phases of the game. So you got to love that. Great finish to the season. Congratulations for you, year 1 with the Charlotte Christian boys as well. We appreciate you for tuning in to Big Talk with Todd and Noah, presented by Xfinity. Make sure to download and subscribe on the NBC Sports YouTube channel and wherever you get your audio podcast. And as always, we will talk to you next week.